For me, I'm very excited about the market in Nigeria and Africa as a whole. I think there's a lot of opportunity. Again, I think it is a huge part of the global economy that's grossly untapped. The amount of potential there, and that's why you have a lot of people from that region, from Nigeria and Africa as a whole, where they actually end up moving to other parts of the world, where the country itself has a lot of potential where I do believe a lot can be accomplished.
Welcome to episode 3 of the Innovating Advice Show. I'm joined by Emeka Udeagha, a financial consultant at IG Wealth Management in British Columbia, Canada. Emeka is from Nigeria and has been in Canada for the last 8 years, so we're talking about the current environment and innovation in both countries. We also tackle preconceived notions people may have about Nigeria head on, which is an important element of the Innovating Advice Show. I aim to open our minds and look beyond our own borders to learn about other cultures directly. You're listening to the Innovating Advice Show, and I'm your host, Kate Holmes, bringing you the global pulse on financial services innovation, featuring financial planners, financial advisors, and related professionals from all corners of the globe. Let's dive in. Hello, Emeka.
Hi, Kate.
It is awesome to have you. When we have talked over the last couple of years, you have a great story of you were born in Nigeria, lived there most of your life, and then you've been in the beautiful small town of Nanaimo in British Columbia, and I love it there. I grew up in Seattle, so I've been there. So we're sort of getting a twofer here in talking with you today. So usually we dive in and learn about our guests' advice market in their country, but we're going to be talking about both the advice market in Canada, where you're at now, and in Nigeria, where you're from, you still go back to, and you've got a lot of good thoughts and experience around the similarities and differences in the markets there, sort of some ideas for the growth of the profession, and even expanding beyond Nigeria and into Africa.
Yes, for sure. I actually lived there in Nigeria till I was 16. I actually lived in Ghana for 5 years. So I moved from Nigeria to Ghana. I
Oh, wow.
did my biochemistry, so my BSc is in biochemistry. So that was in Ghana. I was there for 5 years. Went back to Nigeria for 1 year, and then moved to Canada 8 years ago, I believe. So yeah, and Seattle was really great. I was actually there 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. I don't know. It's still kind of a rainy part of the year, but you're used to that being up in that
It is. We don't get
area.
snow here. Like it's all rain here. So our rain is snow. And Seattle is pretty much like it's a 2.5 hour drive from where I stay. So yeah, it's not
Yeah.
too bad.
No, that's great. So let's kind of start with Canada, since that's where you're at now. You are a certified financial planner professional. You've actually got a number of designations. You teach, you do taxes, you are highly involved in the profession. So talk us through the market in Canada and what your role is.
So my role is I'm a financial consultant here. I don't work for, there's the big banks here, but I work for, I wouldn't say it's a brokerage. So it's an advisor firm. It's been here for about 91 years. And it's the first place I started here in my practice when I moved here to Canada. The beauty about this actually is, unlike if I was at a bank, I'd have a book of clients from here. I had to literally start from the ground up. So, actually get those relationships with clients and actually get them as clients as opposed to just have them handed to me. So yeah, it's been great. The market here in general, I guess it's a combination. You've got, of course, the big banks. So you have advisors there, and then it's sort of broken up into multiple sections. So you have, there's a lot of independent advisors coming up, and then a lot of those big banks actually have another arm to them, like the brokerage arm, where they handle more high net worth clients, and they do more of the in-depth planning for them. But those are pretty much the three main levels, if you want to call it.
And there's a pretty big advice sector in Canada. What about like 90,000 advisors? And there's a total population in Canada of about 35 million?
Yes, especially, I mean, the growing point and the way you actually find it is a lot of those, a huge chunk of those 90,000 advisors in the whole country, majority of them are actually at the bank because usually that's the easy entry for most advisors to the branch level. And then most people start from there and then they can go on to the brokerages and even become, I actually know a couple of people who have literally been in every one of those phases. Start at a bank and learn from the ground up, go to a brokerage, and then when they feel comfortable and they've had that loyal client base, now they go independent and sort of take their clients with them, right? I guess it all just depends on your comfort level. It's pretty much the advice is the same necessarily as you go from one place to another. It's just what you're comfortable with, you know, the amount of responsibility you have. If you're an advisor at the branch level, all you do is show up 9 to 5, look after your clients, and you're gone home. Whereas on the other end, someone who's an independent, there's a lot more you're doing. You're in charge of your compliance. You're looking after clients. The commitment level to clients is a lot higher. I mean, I guess the reward is a lot higher too. But, you know, in terms of the level of advice, I guess you can call that, you know, it's pretty much the same across the board. Just depends on the amount of work the advisor is going to sort of be left with.
And when we're talking about advice, and especially across banks and in the retail sector, because we're going to touch on this in a minute when we talk about Nigeria, is that kind of comprehensive advice? Is it mostly related to investments and product selling? What can customers expect when they're going through that more retail banking experience?
In Nigeria or here in Canada?
First in Canada, and then we'll touch on Nigeria in a minute.
So now, I mean, it's actually changing. Whether you're at the banks, you're at a brokerage or independent, the need for actually more comprehensive financial planning is actually more forward evident than ever. And that's because, so 2 years ago, CRM2 actually got launched here in Canada. And in the past, what's happened is clients usually get a statement, and all that shows in the statement is just your rate of return and the percentage how much fees you're paying. CRM2, what that did now is forced every financial institution to actually disclose the dollar amount. So it's not just a percentage. You have to show the dollar amount. So that became an eye opener for a lot of institutions now because clients are now asking questions. So, you know, it's very easy for someone who has $1 million with you to see 2% fees and not really think much of it. But if you translate that 2% to actual dollar amounts and they see $20,000 now in their statements, you better be able to justify what value you're offering, right? So in the last 2 years now, all sectors, whether you're at a branch level or independent level now, have been striving to actually provide more of a comprehensive financial planning experience. Again, you need to be able to justify the fees, right? I always say fees is only an issue if value is not perceived, right? So now that the fee is now forefront as in the industry as a whole, a lot more institutions are now sort of pushing more towards that, offering comprehensive financial advice. So it's not just come here, get your investments in out the door, but it's what other extra value can you provide? You know, can you, for instance, I'm dual licensed, so I'm also insurance licensed. You know, so in addition to investment advice, investment planning, can you offer an insurance plan for clients? You know, tax planning, like you said, I do taxes as well. You know, so just being able to not just necessarily justify what clients are actually paying fees, but to be able to show value more. And the only way to be able to do it is to be able to offer more of that comprehensive plan, because anyone can pick products. I always say it's like products, you know, if you get a client based on products, you would always lose them because they would always find better products and better fees elsewhere, right? So I guess that's where the industry is going as a whole now, where it's almost less about the products and the rate of return, but more on the overall financial plan.
Yeah. And I was just having a conversation kind of on the idea of moving from transparency, which would be that statement showing, okay, you're paying 2% on the million you have invested, to clarity around, well, here's the actual dollar amount you're spending, because that makes it a much more real number to clients. Yes. And here's the value that you're getting for that. You said this was CRM2. So is that a regulation, and what does that stand for?
Yep, CRM2. It was a regulation, and it's actually been in the works. I remember when I started here, 2013. I remember it was being talked about, but then it never really got passed because it took a while, the whole politics behind it, and they finally did push it. I do remember, you know, it wasn't all pushed at once because some institutions sort of started at different times. So we here where I work, Ours was actually in June, so ours was mandated from June. So it was weird because it started showing in the June statements and not the December statements, right? So we report June to June, whereas some institutions who started early in January would show January. So, but I know as of 2020, literally I mean, maybe a few haven't, but most institutions are actually mandated now to show that dollar amount, as opposed to just a percentage.
Which is great. And we're seeing that happening all over the world, kind of regulation coming in and mandating that clients really understand exactly what they're paying, what they're getting for it, and in some cases taking action where regulators realize that clients have been paying potentially for years on end and not actually getting any service for that or any value for what they've been paying.
And have no idea. Some clients didn't even know they were paying fees. I've had conversations with clients where they didn't even realize they were paying fees. And I've actually had clients or prospects come to me and tell me, well, I like this guy better because he said, I'm getting this and up. And I'm like, well, it doesn't matter where you go. You're going to pay a fee. I guess that's what CRM2 is trying to get across, where it's just be a lot more open to clients. So they're making decisions based on being informed, as opposed to just sort of making decisions blindly, as to what's going on with their portfolios, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So I want to talk about Nigeria, but you've just got such an interesting story. I want to take a tangent for a minute to figure out how you got into the position that you're in, because you were actually on the path to becoming a cardio surgeon.
Yes, I was. Like I said, I left Nigeria when I was 16. I moved to Ghana. I did my 4-year biochemistry degree, so bachelor's in biochemistry for 4 years. Finished that, and then the goal was to go to med school to become a surgeon. Now, my dad was a professor. My dad was a history professor, right? So even before I knew what I was going to do, I was always pushed to the sciences. Like I was sort of groomed to the sciences. So I was just naturally good in the sciences because that's all I knew. That's all my parents sort of brought me to know. But it wasn't something I enjoyed, right? And I remember even while I was doing biochemistry, like I would dabble, and we had a family friend at the time who was a stockbroker back in Nigeria, and I would save money while I was in school, and I'd give her money on the side to help me get into, because I was just fascinated by the markets, right? I didn't understand the markets. I just knew it was something I was just fascinated by. So I was dabbling in stocks on the side, like while I was going through my biochemistry degree. And then when I left, I was supposed to come over to, actually, I was going to go to the States for med school. And for some reason, I ended up in Canada. And then, unbeknownst to my mom and my aunties, I just made a detour and said I wasn't going to do med school. I was going to get my MBA. Right.
Oh,
So
wow. How did they
I
take
know.
that?
Well, not so much in the beginning, but for me, my philosophy, and my mom still, I guess it's just culture again, understanding the two cultures. Back in Nigeria, your parents always want you to become either a doctor, engineer, or lawyer, right? Those are the three professions that they wanted the kids to be. So she didn't really get why I would want to leave that and then do this. But I guess now she sort of gets it, because for me, it wasn't more about the money you make as a surgeon or lifestyle. It was more about doing something I loved. And that's why for me, I felt like if I had gone to become a surgeon, I would be a 40-year-old miserable surgeon who's just chopping people's hearts and not actually into it. Whereas what I'm doing now as a financial consultant, I actually do enjoy it. Like I can literally be doing this 10 hours a day and not even realize the day has gone by, right? So, for me, that's more of what I like to spend my time doing, something I actually do enjoy.
So you say, I always love talking with people when you hear their story just like yours, and really essentially it was a calling to you.
Pretty much. Like I said, it was something where I didn't understand it, but I knew it was something I just loved. Like, I mean, I would watch movies about, just stocks and markets, and I read books about that. Like, it's something I knew I wanted to know how to do, but I just didn't get it because, I was never thought anything about it. And that's why the second I realized I could get an MBA instead of going to med school, I took it. So I was so way behind with my rest of my peers because I had no experience whatsoever in business. I actually had to do what's called a pre-MBA because I had literally no education whatsoever in business. So once I was done with that, came with me actually learning on ground. So I think what I did was, even here, was while I was doing my MBA, I was actually coming here and just sort of not volunteering myself and working with other consultants here, instead of actually seeing how things were done. Because it's one thing to read in the books, it's one thing to go through theory, and it's another thing to actually be in the practice. So, I think I did a 4 month internship here working with other consultants, and then realized, what, I actually do love this. Right. And that was like an eye opener. It's like I've never looked back since then. So
That's awesome. It's so great to have people like you in the profession that are just like, I want to be here. I love what I do. I love helping people. And you touched on sort of the culture in Nigeria being around grooming to be a doctor, a lawyer, those prestigious careers in life. And let's talk about the culture in Nigeria a little bit, because most of the people I know in Nigeria, like yourself, have MBAs, PhDs, MDs, and I don't know that the outward perception of Nigeria necessarily matches that. So talk us through the culture a little bit, and maybe some things that people might not realize about Nigeria.
And that's totally correct. I mean, like, I'll use the States for example, because that's where you are. I was reading an article and I didn't even realize, I mean, I still don't know how true that is, where it said, I think for a while, it was actually the Chinese who were the highest educated immigrants in America. I think, again, I don't know how true that is, but I was reading where now I think Nigerians are close to being the highest educated immigrants in America. I mean, and that's just the value, I think, as parents. I mean, for me, going through all the education I went through, I had $0 in student loans, right? So a lot of going with the culture, those are things where a lot of parents sort of attribute as their way of gifting things to the kids, where if they don't give you anything in life, the best they could give you is education. So that's why it's, you find a lot of Nigerians who are high. I mean, now you go to Nigeria, you have a master's, and it's nothing because everyone has a master's.
Yep.
Right. I mean, you always have to have something higher than the masters right now. So there's just that, the culture is just groomed around education. And that's sort of helped those Nigerians who have actually left and gone to other countries, because they've just instilled that need to always want to not just learn new things, but just always be the best in your field. Right. I mean, for me to, like you said, get into CFP, it wasn't something I just threw a dart on the wall. I knew I was in the industry as a financial advisor. I had to look for the highest possible education I could get in my field. And I was being a certified financial planner, right? And I went and it took me 18 months and I got it done, right? So it does have its, it could be a high pressure situation growing up as a child, where literally before you even know what you want to do, your parents pretty much decide that whether you want to go to school or not, you're going to school. But
it's not a bad thing to instill in kids.
It's not, right? I mean, at the time we see it as a burden, but I mean, you do grow up and you look back and you almost want to thank your parents for it, right? Because it does give you that drive to want to make yourself better.
You said you almost want to thank your parents, but you haven't yet.
Well, well, I mean, you sort of weigh the pros and cons. I mean, you look at the struggle you've gone through with school. I mean, for me, what the funny thing I was actually saying to one of my colleagues here is, I almost left med school because I was just sick and tired of the reading and the books and everything, and I switched roles and became a financial consultant. And I've done pretty much, even if not more reading than I would have done if I was in med school. Because, getting my CFP, I had to go through rigorous education, and I have my RRC, Registered Retirement Consultant designation. I had to go through rigorous education and exams. I have my CDFA. So it's like, well, why didn't I just stay in med school, right? And still, right? So it doesn't seem like you can escape the studying and the education part of it, regardless of where you go, which I think is good. It's not bad. Some people might find they might be overeducated for what they're doing, but education is not something where you can have too much of, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's something, especially in any profession, including financial planning, it shouldn't ever end. You need to continuously improve your skills, technical skills, relationship skills, all of the above. Let's dive into the market, the financial advice market in Nigeria, with this, emphasis on education. And I know a lot of Nigerians, it sounds like, leave Nigeria and, like you, maybe stay in other countries where they've gotten their further education. But what does it look like there, in terms of the consumer understanding of financial advice, financial planning, and what kind of offerings are currently in Nigeria?
Right now, I would say Nigeria, the financial market is more on the retail level. There's a lot of big banks. There's a lot of banks, so it's still more the level of advice is still more on the retail level, right? There's not a lot of, I mean, compared to where I am here in Canada, where there's still not a whole lot of independents here, but there's quite a few of them popping up. The whole independent advice and brokerages are not as rampant as they are in, Canada or other developed countries. So it's still more on that retail level where people are more, and again, it's just that mindset thing with culture where, you're a guy who has an office in your basement and you say you're an independent. Well, I'd rather give my money to a bank. I know that bank's name, they have ads everywhere on TV. So I can walk in there and I can talk to a teller and I can talk to a branch manager and I feel like my money's safe, right? So I think that's the only, not an obstacle, but that's it's just getting the culture, getting the mindset away from that, where people almost do not believe that a one guy who has a firm as an independent can provide value than a bank. Even though that guy who's an independent, if working at the bank, would still offer you the same level of advice, but just because he works for a bank, a retail, big bank, they feel a lot more comfortable. And that's why right now, getting that shift away from having people have more relationship with the advisor as opposed to the institution actually would help in the Nigerian market, because that way, if I know my advisor is the guy who's giving me the advice, not the bank. I mean, your advisor can work for the bank. Your bank is not giving you advice. You're going to meet your advisor in the bank. So if you have trust in your advisor, it doesn't matter if he works at the bank or if he's independent. I think it's just getting that, that not mindset out of that would actually grow the independent side of things in Nigeria. But for now, it's heavily retail. Heavily, there's a lot of banks. Banks are actually opening every day. As a matter of fact, before I left in 2012, actually many years before that, they actually had a huge amalgamation of banks. There were so many banks in Nigeria that the government actually put a law in and then put a cap where any bank who had less than that cap for assets under management had to either shut down or be taken over by another bank. So I know at some
Wow.
point there was like, God, I can't even remember, but 15 years ago, where a lot of banks had to merge to become bigger, right? So it sort of reduced the number of banks, but at the same time, it sort of helped people feel a lot better because everyone was just opening banks because, rather than have an independent practice, people just wanted to deal with a bank. So I would go and I open my own bank, right? And you ended up having a situation where there were a lot of small banks. So the government actually had to intervene and actually set a cap. So there was a lot of banks shutting down, a lot of buyouts, a lot of mergers and acquisitions to be able to curb that, right? So
Interesting. And I think I'm a little bit surprised to hear of the trust in banks. And that's why I love these conversations and kind of opening up and learning so much about other cultures and other markets, and to sort of address a potential elephant in the room. What about corruption in Nigeria?
well, so the thing with corruption in Nigeria is the corruption that you see on the news or you hear about Nigeria in general has nothing to do with the banks. It's more on the political level. Right. So a lot of the corruption that goes on, a lot of the corruption, when you hear of corruption, it literally is not even at the financial level in terms of banks. Like, banks in itself, there's not a lot of scandals that come out from there. It's more on the political level where you hear of a senator who has been allocated X amount and was supposed to do X amount for his constituency and then goes and embezzles the money kind of thing, right? So that's where more of the corruption you hear that from, and that's where that sort of lies in terms of the financial sector in itself. As to like scandals, you hear Ponzi scheme, and there's not literally, I don't even think there's any major cases like that. So even when you're looking at corruption, like you look at, so I'll use the States, yeah, I'll use America, for example, and I'll use Nigeria. If you're looking at financial crimes, there's actually a lot more financial crimes in America than there are in Nigeria,
Yeah,
right?
there's a lot in the US.
Well, I mean, in just the comparison. So you look at financial crimes in Nigeria, and there's you rarely hear of financial crimes where someone gave, an advisor had X amount under management and then just bailed the client's money. It never happens. Again, that's because there's not a lot of independent advisors out there. There's more banks. You rarely hear of banks just bailing with clients' money. So there's not a lot of financial corruption, than there. So it's a different level of corruption, I guess is the word I'm looking for. In America, I guess the political side of things, they're held accountable. So even though they do have corruption on the political side,
Well,
to an extent, I guess, to an extent, right? They're held accountable to an extent where they know, if they get caught, they're in trouble. Whereas it's more rampant in the financial sector. Whereas in Nigeria, the financial sector has not as much corruption there. It's more on the political level. That's where, and again, that's what makes the news, right? And it just gets blown out of proportion, and it makes it seem like it's the whole country in general. But it's more on the political side. That I would say for sure. It's just the level of like accountability to politicians is not there as much, where they can get away with a lot of things, um, as opposed to place like America, where you have a whistleblower who blows it, and they actually hold them accountable.
yep. Yeah. And I think if we think about another, I would say very strong stereotype about Nigeria, how many princes are there in Nigeria?
I don't know. I'm a prince myself, right? but,
But that's one of those things
but
in the news, right? It's the elderly people getting the emails or the phone calls from a Nigerian prince, and I think for most people, it's if you sort of ask them when they hear Nigeria and money, what do they think? And that's for better or worse, and probably for worse, that's what's going to come to mind.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, no doubt. I mean, I had one here, and it wasn't a Nigerian email, of course, but I had one here, and it came. It was a call I got on my phone, and this is something that is actually everywhere. I guess it's everywhere, but it just comes in different forms. So in Nigeria, it would be a Nigerian prince. The ones we're dealing with here, it's actually a big thing here. Is people getting calls like it's from the government, from CRA,
Oh,
and
yep,
saying they
yep,
owe
same
they
here.
owe taxes, and they're going to get arrested. So it's the same type of scam. The only difference is a different approach. Guys here in Canada are not doing Nigerian prints; they're going with CRA. Guys in Nigeria are going by Nigerian prints; they're not going CRA. Just because we probably don't have CRA, the IRS or the tax regulatory body in Nigeria isn't as forceful as people think. So maybe the Nigerian prints is a better approach for them. I don't know. And here, of course, Nigerian prince doesn't work for them, so maybe the CRA approach is a better, better route for them. I don't know, but yeah, it is an issue, because, like I said, a lot of that's all people hear, and that's all people hear in the news or read on the internet. But then again, you realize in a country that has over 200 million, probably close to the population of the US, you will find that's a tiny sector of the population. But unfortunately, bad news actually corrupts more than good news, right? So with that tiny sector, it's very, very easy, for the reputation to be tarnished, for sure.
Well, absolutely. And honestly, that really is a big part of what I want to do here on the Innovating Advice Show is, have open conversations about these stereotypes and break down the stereotypes, because there could be planners out there who have, prospects coming to them from Nigeria, and they might have certain, preconceived notions about what it means to be a Nigerian and what Nigerians might, think about dealing with money. So, thank you for being open to this conversation, helping break down some of those. And you made such great points, and it's so true. How much corruption is in the US, it happens in Canada. I mean, really, it happens everywhere, but we tend to somehow make it a bigger deal when it's other places. But that's, I think.
I know. So for me, I'm well traveled. So I've been in a lot of places where I find too that a lot of the people who I have this conversation with, who are stuck in that whole scam and whatever news they hear, are people who don't know better. It's what they hear on the news, right? So in one aspect, I don't blame them, because it's all they know. I mean, they haven't been there, they haven't left Canada, so they don't know any better. They only know what they read on the internet and what they hear on the news. So in one aspect, if they leave and go to Nigeria, or leave and go to other countries, would they be a lot more informed and a lot more better exposed? Probably yes.
Yep.
Most people aren't, so they believe what they hear or what they see, I guess. So
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So let's kind of dive in talking a bit about, your vision for the profession and sort of what's happening in Canada and what you see could be beneficial in Nigeria. And I have to say, I kept thinking as you were talking about how few independents there are. And I totally appreciate that the trust is currently in the banks. But in conversations I've had with other colleagues where they've been in similar situations of more of a developing market when it comes to financial advice and financial planning, you often need that catalyst there that is going to be the first one to kind of create that great independent brand and build that trust. And when you have no competition, that can be a pretty great thing if you build your business right.
Oh, for sure. And right now too, the big change that's going on. So even with the CRM too, so that's one. Technology is a big thing. Technology, I find now in general, like, I went the other day. I have my I stepped into one of the banks here, and after meeting with the one of the managers in his office, he flipped his iPad, and I had to sign on the iPad, right? So, even here in my office now, we're going paperless, right? A lot of the forms now are online. Before in the past, clients want to change their address, they let sign the form, they have to pop in and sign. Now everything they can go online and then change their address by themselves. Just the way the role technology is playing now. Right now with MFDA, so the Mutual Fund Dealers Association, that sort of regulates advisors here in Canada, they're a little bit restrictive though, as to so a lot of the changes. So you have realtors and mortgage brokers who use DocuSign. You can be in Texas and you can buy a home in BC. They send you something by email, you open the link, you sign here, sign here, sign here, and you send it back, the realtor gets it. So I guess the industry in general, we're still a little bit restricted with compliance and the regulatory bodies. They're still they seem a little bit more open to the changes just because of where the world is going right now. So I find like that's a big thing going on now generally in the industry, where there's the use of more technology. Right. I mean, even where I work here, we just launched a new platform now, where in December now, so where it's a lot more client friendly. The old fashioned way of clients writing you a check if they want to open accounts. Now with the new system we have, we can literally pull money from their account. Like we can literally pull $500,000 from. I mean, all they do is they come in here to open an account. They just give you the authorization. You can literally hit a button here at the office, and it sucks out $500,000 from their account. Right. So that whole convenience now of not having to go and write a check. I mean, no one has a check anymore, or not having to go and, get a money order. I can have a client call me literally from Toronto, from licensed in Toronto, and tell me, I've got an extra $200,000 in the bank. Okay, good. Give me authorization. I hit the button. It sucks right out of his account, right? I mean, so, the whole use of technology as a whole, I find is not only making the whole concept of financial planning a lot more easier, but it's making it a lot more client friendly. It's making clients a lot more involved. Right. Financial planning, going to see a financial advisor almost used to feel like going to the dentist, where people always dread it. It's like, God, like I'm going here and I'm going to sign all this 10,000 papers and he's going to tell me a whole bunch of stuff. I have no idea what's going on. But now I guess with the whole involvement of technology is to try and make it a lot more client centric. So clients understand more what they're involved in, and also making the process a lot less painful for them as well.
Yeah, and that's one thing I always try to remind advisors of is, we think about technology sort of as it relates to financial planning and what technology is available, but think about the technology that you use in your everyday life. And I used to joke that when I order a Domino's pizza, I mean, I enjoy the pizza tracker that tells me,
Yeah,
Pete the pizza
exactly.
maker, just put it in the oven. And now he's driving to the house. And I was like, okay, I'm used to that kind of technology. And I mean, I remember it was probably 3 years ago, I went to the doctor and they handed me this whole stack of paper. And I looked at them and I was like, are you kidding me? Like that delayed my appointment. I was like, why didn't I fill this out online? So I actually only work with professionals that have everything electronic to be able to make an appointment online. My doctor now, I can see all of my history of, my annuals and blood work and everything. Like it's always there anytime I want to access it. And clients are used to that in every other aspect of their life. And it shouldn't be any different when it comes to financial planning.
Yeah, I even have an app on my phone. It's a health app. And literally, if I'm sick and I need a doctor, I click it. It has I don't know how it does it, but it has a doctor
Magic.
on standby. Literally, it pops up on my phone, and I can tell my symptoms, and literally I can get diagnosed over the phone. And if I need a referral, he gives me a referral right over the phone. I literally could be in my bed sick and I don't have to get up. So, you know, you can see now a lot. And the thing is, the medical field was one where they actually are not very keen on technology. I have a couple of friends and clients who are doctors, and that's one industry where they're still trying to do everything paper and everything manual. So even that industry as a whole is actually taking a technology route. So you can see technology as a whole is, I mean, it's 2020, it's going to happen regardless. So either you move with the change or you get left behind.
Yeah, and we've talked a little bit about sort of be open to change in your practice and changing a lot of it. So when you think about that, is it kind of things like going paperless, leveraging technology? Are there other elements that you'd encourage advisors to be open to changing in their practice?
Well, it was just the way you acquire clients. So, I mean, I've only been doing this for about 7 years, 6, 7 years now. And in just that short amount of time, the way I even reach out to get clients, when I got here, I was trained by advisors who, one of my mentors here, actually, he's been here for 45 years. He's in his 60s, and he started working here when he was 18 or 19. So,
Wow.
I got tips from him, but I can guarantee you a lot. I mean, he's a great guy. I mean, he's super knowledgeable, but a lot of the things that worked for him then, if I tried that now, I would fail woefully, right? Not because, I mean, it worked for him, right? But it's just what's going on in the times that are there are other advisors, more efficient approaches, I guess, that make it less painful for the advisor and less painful for the client. So even just not just in running your practice and embracing technology and embracing how you run your practice because it makes you more efficient, but just in how you acquire your clients, right? The old way of maybe door knocking, it might still work for people. Cold calling might still work for people. But then again, with cold calling now, like the example I gave you now, I'm getting calls from supposed CRA threatening me, that I'm going to jail if I don't pay my taxes. I know that's BS. But with the whole scam thing going on the phone, maybe cold calling used to be efficient 10 years ago as an advisor, or 20 years ago. But in 2020, would that necessarily work for you? Yes, you might get a few clients out of it, but are you going to maximize your resources? Like, are you going to actually be efficient? You might get 2 clients, but you might have to make 10,000 calls, right? You're still going to get
And would they
clients.
even be the clients that you would want to
That
work with?
exactly, right? So it's not just about getting clients for the sake of getting clients, but being efficient at it, right? So I spent 2 weeks making 10,000 calls just to get 2 clients that maybe or maybe not be the kind of clients I want to do. Or I take a more efficient approach and spend a day and do it right and get 3 clients that are actually clients that I actually want to deal with. So one thing we actually do here, and I've actually been doing this over a year, it's more specific marketing for seminars. So it's more, I mean, before in the olden days when I used to do seminars, we'd actually send, flyers out and then make sure we call every one of them. And then, to do a seminar, we'd have to be working on this for 2 months, right? And then we'd have 10 people register and only maybe 3 would show up, So at the end of the day, it was a lot of time for not the result we wanted. Whereas now for our seminars, I mean, I had one 2 weeks ago and we had 40 people show up. It only took us 2 weeks to actually get ready, and it was all online. Created the content, had a platform, had a landing page, and then we knew what we wanted. We knew the areas we wanted to target, and then we just, sort of had the marketing go to that area, had the right people, So, it's a more direct marketing, more direct way of reaching the clients. You actually reach into clients that you want to actually work with, as opposed to just hoping, casting a net and crossing your fingers and hoping you actually get the right clients. And half the time, it's not actually clients you actually want to work with, right?
Yeah, and you used my favorite word in business, which is efficiency. I am just obsessed with finding efficiencies in every way you can. And I actually, the first job I had in the profession, I worked for a small independent advice firm, and I became a principal of the firm, sort of like a director of operations. And I actually ended up adding so many efficiencies. I don't think this is a word, but I'm going to say I efficiencyed my way out of my own job. I just kept
You're
looking
too
at
efficient for
everything,
them.
and yeah, I mean, it was crazy. And my goal was, the amount of things that I think advisors do that either don't actually add value, they just do it because it's the way they've always done it, or, it's easier to just keep doing something that way than take the time to find another way. And, I just kept looking and I was like, the more time I spend now creating efficiencies for these processes, either A, I can spend more time actually helping clients and truly providing value, or B, I've got more time for myself.
Mhm.
Either one of those are fantastic outcomes.
Well, I mean, that's exactly right. And for me, I actually learned the hard way because a lot of the things I did, a lot of the mistakes I made, I sort of made them as I did things. So for me, I sort of went through it and went through my week or my month and sort of categorized everything I did versus the results I got. And then after a while of doing that, I sort of realized like a lot of the things I was doing that would take me 2 weeks to do, there's probably a better way to do it in like 2 days.
Yeah.
Right. So now I have out of, 14 days, I freed up 12 more days that I can do other stuff or 12 more days that I can have to myself. Like, so for me, it's not just about being busy for the sake of being busy, but if you can find a way of, scaling, I mean, it makes things easy for you as an advisor. And the less work you have to do, the less work you have to give your clients. If I'm here still stuck in the paper world and I'm filling in 10,000 forms and 10,000 applications, well, guess what? That's 10,000 forms and application my clients have to come in and sign, right? So it's not just work for me, it's work for my client. And the second my clients get approached by someone else who is going to make their life a lot easier, and not call them every 2 weeks to come sign a form because it's a new form out or whatnot, they're going to jump in a heartbeat, especially if there's not that relationship there. A lot of times when you get a new client, the first 2 years it's almost like a dating relationship, right? You're testing the waters. They're testing you at the same time to see what their experience is, especially if they've been with previous advisors. They're always going to gauge your performance based on what they've had in the past, right? So if they're coming to you and you're giving them more work than they used to have, I can guarantee you that relationship is not going to last long.
No, I would not be a client of an advisor that gives me more work, especially if it's paperwork.
Exactly. I hate paperwork myself. I mean, I can't stand it. Like, not just because there's just too much stuff like in there where, you miss one line and then you got to call the client again because they've got an initial. I mean, it's almost unnecessary work that can be avoided with the right level of technology if done well. So for me, I'm a big fan of technology in your practice. Like I said, it just makes it more efficient for you, gives you more time for yourself. And a lot of times too, I mean, paperwork, for example, if I'm filling a paper for a client, it's based on me now to actually make sure I tick the correct boxes. When I'm filling the same form on my computer now, if I miss a line, it doesn't let me go to the next page, right? So, I hit next, it tells me no error, and it circles the part I missed in red. So I know to actually finish that up before. So it's a lot more efficient. Whereas if I was doing paper and I missed that line, well, I can't see it. Client has signed it. I send it in for processing. It gets bounced back because you miss a line. You got to bring the clients back in. They got initial, so
Yeah,
and
technology
that's
makes it idiot proof.
exactly, it does
You
make it
can't
easier
screw
for
it up.
yourself. You actually can't screw it up. So I've just saved myself 5 hours now that I can use servicing and providing value for that client, or doing other stuff to provide value for other clients, or even just take time for myself.
Yeah, that's great. And how are you seeing technology being used in Nigeria, either in everyday life, like my amazing Domino's pizza example, or, within financial services?
Technology, it's actually huge, and I'm actually very, very, very impressed and proud of what's going on in Nigeria. There's a lot of entrepreneurs coming up now, and maybe not necessarily in the financial field, because again, like that's heavily retail, and even with the retail financial sector, there's still a lot of banks are becoming more innovative in the services they offer and the client experience that they actually offer clients. But you look at manufacturing, you look at other sectors, health, and then there's an immense implementation of technology. I mean, there's I forget what his name is. He's a great guy who I think moved from the UK and Nigerian, and then he's actually set up an app So here in Canada, we have a lot of truck drivers that sort of do the rounds and move cargo from one part to another. So he's got this cool app where he actually creates where people who have deliveries on truck drivers can actually track the cargo. Like, I mean, it's a very neat model. And I started reading about his work and how he actually went about it. But I mean, that's just one example of, just the use of technology. It's not just in the financial sector as a whole, but in general, a lot more people are more open. There's a lot more entrepreneurs right now in Nigeria coming up and starting their own thing and taking advantage of just the global resources they have, right? And actually maximizing that. And you've seen that across the industry, right? Financial, health sector, manufacturing. It's just coming up all over.
Yeah, I love that. It's so awesome and kind of wild to see what people are creating everywhere, what they're going to come up with. I'm so excited to see what happens over I'm going to say the next 10 years, because the last 10 years just flew by. So
Oh
it'll
yeah,
be curious to see where we're at in 2030.
we might have flying cars by then. You never know.
I hope so.
I mean, now we have self-driving cars, so I mean, another 10
Yeah.
years and we might have flying cars.
Yeah, my husband and I took a little trip to Los Angeles just last week spontaneously, and we were driving around, and oh my goodness, within an hour, you'd only go a couple of miles, and it was painful. I was like, I need my car. I need to just drive over all of this. So
I was actually
fingers
in Los
crossed on that
Angeles
one.
on Friday.
Oh, no way. I was there too.
Yeah, yeah. I just got back actually on Sunday, 2 days ago. It was
Oh,
actually
that's
nice.
crazy.
Too much traffic, but
So much traffic. Yes.
yeah, yeah.
So, Emeka, any final words or thoughts on the future of the profession in Canada, in Nigeria, Africa regionally, globally?
For me, I'm very excited about the market in Nigeria and Africa as a whole. I think there's a lot of opportunity. Again, I think it is a huge part of the global economy that's grossly untapped. The amount of potential there, and that's why, I mean, you have a lot of people from that region, from Nigeria and Africa as a whole, where they actually end up moving to other parts of the world, where the country itself has a lot of potential, where I do believe a lot can be accomplished. In the financial sector, there's room to grow. Like I said, a lot more people now are open to outside retail and outside the big banks approach. There's a lot more independence coming up. There's a lot more insurance companies and more companies popping up more on the planning side of things that are actually getting developed. So people are sort of getting warmed up to the idea of that. Here in Canada, there's a big thing with the whole robo advising. I know it's also big in the States there. And that's something too that I find can be a big thing also in Nigeria. I mean, there's a couple of banks in Nigeria, I was there 3 years ago, where they're implementing something like that. It's not full on robo advising, but instead of a portal where you can go in there and put in your details and it'll sort of tell you what to do with your money and how to move money around and that kind of thing. Because again, that's another part, again, looking at technology that's growing here in Canada. It's not actually as big as it is in the States, but robo advising also is another thing that's kicking in here as well. So I find, like, down, looking at the next 5-6 years, that's something that I think would there's opportunity here in Canada. A lot of there's people who still need that face-to-face interaction with advisors. And again, with the CRM2 and the fees being disclosed, there's people who maybe not so much, right? They look at their portfolio and look at what they have, and they're paying $10,000 in fees, and they feel like, what, I see my advisor once a year. Maybe I don't need that face-to-face interaction. Now the robo advisor part is actually kicking up, so maybe that might be something for you, right? So in terms of Canada, that's that's an area where I feel is actually growing more on the robo advisor side. And again, that's just part of the rise in technology. And then looking in Nigeria, financial planning side of things, I feel there's a huge opportunity. Again, like I said, Nigeria has a population of close to 250 million. Lagos, I mean, the major big cities alone, I take one of those cities and we're almost the entire population of Canada as a whole, right? So in terms of numbers, looking at, it's a numbers game. Like, the numbers there, the opportunity, the people are there. So the demand is there. It's just a matter of finding the supply and making sure the services and infrastructure is set in the right place so people actually have access to it.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely have to have you on again in a year or two, or we'll see how fast everything sort of evolves and innovation comes to Nigeria. But that's definitely a space I've been keeping my eye on for the last couple of years, and the incredible things going on all throughout Africa. So, Emeka, thank you so much for the conversation we had today. Again, for breaking down stereotypes, for changing people's perceptions. As I said, that's a big part of what I want to do here on the Innovating Advice Show. And I can't let you go without asking what your favorite food or drink from your country is.
So there's two that so I have to give two because I live here in Canada and I'm from Nigeria. So my favorite drink here in Canada, I actually love root beer.
Okay, any specific brand?
Well, I have two. The A&W root beer is actually just my
Classic.
best. It's just classic, right? And then there's this no-name brand for some reason I get here at the store, and for some reason it just tastes good. But the A&W brand is actually my number one. Like, you can't go wrong with that, right?
No, I agree.
And then in Nigeria, let's see, my favorite drink in Nigeria, I actually like, there's something called Zobo, and I don't know how to make it, just don't ask me. But it's actually, so it's ZOBO, and it's actually made from a bunch of leaves, and it's, again, I don't know the science that goes in it, but it tastes like cranberry juice, and it's really, really nice. So,
oh, how fun.
those would be
great.
my two favorite drinks.
Well, good. Now I'm craving a root beer, and I'm thinking about root beer floats come summertime. So
Oh yeah.
Thanks for leaving us on that thought. For those that want to connect with you, look down in the show notes, and I will have Emeka's social media contact there. So if you want to follow up on any of the conversations we've had. And thank you again for your time today. Thank you for everything that you've shared, and I look forward to having you on the show again in the future.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Innovating Advice Show. I would love to hear from you directly about what resonated, what didn't, and what you'd like to hear in future episodes. You can connect with me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram at Innovating Advice, or hop on over to innovatingadvice.com. Till next time.